Good evening and welcome to this week's Eve Prosper Market Show. I'm your host Lockefox, and here we're going to cover all of the market news for the last about 2 weeks and a lot of the Fanfest news. I'm going to go ahead and go over some show news, but I'm going to do it over the soothing backdrop of JitaCam today. Just a quick reminder that to come join the TweetFleet Slack server, if you guys want to interact with me offline, off-air, that's really the best place to get in touch with me. We have the Prosper channel, and I check it religiously, and you can be pinged when we go live, and I'll post up when stuff goes on YouTube, so that's really the best place to stay engaged. Again, if you are watching this on YouTube rather than Twitch, the live time has changed thanks to daylight savings time. We're now at 0200 rather than 0300. It's the same time stateside, but I know that you Europeans are going into daylight savings time, I believe, this weekend. So just keep a note of the time change. Wanted to put a shout out to Jushin Dragon, who wrote in about our segment on the Eve Swag discussion from the first day of our Fanfest coverage. And he was expressing hope that all of this news is leading up to perhaps a changing or revoking of the mustard brand agreement, and instead being able to move forward with some more things. We know that Eve has been particularly bad about merchandise in the past, so he's pretty happy about that changing in the future. So I wanted to give him a shout out, and he also wanted to meta shout out to Rick's Javix for getting his posters in there. I'm really sad I didn't get my hands on one. So another piece of show news, I am publishing the audio of the show as a podcast. Go to the Eve Prosper blog. Right now, the eveprosper.com redirects to the blog at the moment. On there, you'll be able to get access to the podcast. There are subscription information on the page. I know I need to make it better. It's not great, but we're getting there. It doesn't have Stitcher or iTunes integration yet, but I'll be working on that this weekend. And then lastly, literally just before I went live, I published the Patreon page for the show. It's just like everything else, it's Eve Prosper. So go to patreon.com/Eve Prosper. If you want to throw a couple of bucks at us for beer money, that's really the place to go do it. It means a lot. I've put a couple of stretch goals on there so that if you guys want to see more interviews or panels or tutorials, that's where that will come from, is if you guys can help support the show, I'll go the extra mile to help you out. Again, the show will be free. We're not delaying streams at all. I'm not trying to make a buck off of this. It's more of if you want to throw money in a tip jar, Patreon is there for that. With that, let's go ahead and move on to the news. Fanfest was this last weekend, and it was full of hype, and we did 2 special episodes with a small panel here over that weekend. If you missed any of it, I highly encourage you guys to go check it out on YouTube. They're also up as audio streams on the blog, as I just said. We did a lot of work, and I really got to thank my co-hosts, Ashtarothi, Bach, and Random Boy 50 for stepping up. They were an enormous help. It was a huge project. I'm really glad we did it. If you just want a TLDR, that's a really great place to go. Also, if you guys didn't notice, Skyla, or whatever the heck however you pronounce it, was released. And just as a recap, that's the end of Skynetting, which is remote assisting on fighters. The release of the download on demand feature, which should help newbies get into the game in minutes rather than hours. A T3 defensive system rebalance, which we will touch on later. The Ishtar rebalance hit, and we'll talk about that later. And then the new opportunities system went live for the NPE, which if you're at all sort of the kind of person who watches extra credits or really loves that game dev background kind of thing, or code dev background, I sincerely endorse CCP Rise's Day 3 talk about newbies. And then if you are at all into graph porn, when the keynote goes up, you're going to want to watch CCP Quant's stuff. And he also did some roundtables too. So those should be up on YouTube soon, trademark. Just keep an eye out. Moving on, the Worlds Collide event, Tranquility won. Good job, Camel Empire. The fights were good. The production was kind of bad, which is unfortunate. But the luxury yacht is now on Tranquility, so be sure to go redeem that. They're running, I should have looked up the prices, but these things are pretty sexy. They've got they can do a covert ops cloak. They're immune to bubbles. They warp fast. They align fast. They're a really great utility to have in your fleet, and it will be really sad when these start dying. Moving on, the structures blog was the biggest part of the day 3 presentations from Fanfest, and there was a dev blog for with all of the details, and there are a lot of details. So I encourage everyone to go check out the structures stuff because there's going to be a lot to chew on. It's still open for feedback, so be sure that you're actively feeding back to your CSMers, through the forums, through the devs. I know that they do listen, and a lot of the stuff is still in development, so we could make it great instead of bad. So check out the dev blog, and we also spent the majority of the day 3 talk up on YouTube talking about walking through each of the structures in depth. Moving on, Eve Vegas tickets are on sale. I am intending to go visit. If you want to see me live and be hopelessly disappointed, come down to Eve Vegas. I haven't bought my tickets yet, but I will be picking them up in the next week or so. So I also need to get in touch with, I believe, Manifest to see if I can get a panel to come display some of my graph porn to everyone. Moving on, the CSM 10 has been announced, and by and large, I'm pretty happy with the cast. There are a couple on there that I'm kind of about, but compared with CSM 9 and it having like 5 deadbeats and this really only having maybe 2, I'm actually pretty happy. We'll also cover at the end of the show how good I am at predicting things. I was pretty happy about how my results lined up with the real results. I'll also be doing a follow-up blog in the next week or so, if I can get the time, to walk through the details of my original predictions that I put out during voting. The results for the CSM were pretty close, but my predictions for all of the close misses were way off, so it'll be interesting to talk about that. Moving on, let's talk about Plex. Now, what I had said the last time we were on air 2 weeks ago was that I expected Plex to rise into Fanfest and peak with the hype, and I was wrong. We saw a rise through the first keynote, but then the lack of news from Fanfest kind of meant that there wasn't much to drive the price up, and now we're just sort of in this bouncing between $795 and $805 pattern. Especially with the Fanfest package for game time being extended, I expect to see Plex remain at 800. In fact, I'm willing to go out and say we're stuck at 800 until July. I don't see a good reason why we should move up or down either way. So sorry for anyone who has invested in Plex. We're staying at 800 and get comfortable. Moving on to minerals, this one's going to be pretty interesting. Tritanium's staying relatively flat. We expect this. We hit a reasonable steady state to match up with activity. I kind of expected it to be slightly more up, maybe like 1% more up, with the Brave PL fight going on, but so far we haven't seen that materialize. That might be the thing that's keeping us stable at the moment rather than rising, so keep that in mind. Pyrite continues its slow crawl upwards. We're up above 13 at the moment. Again, I sort of expect it to level off, but if the trend continues, we could either stay steady at 13.0 or continue rising to 13.5. I don't expect it to fall back down to 12.5 unless something significant changes. Moving on to Mexilon, we're continuing to see a dive, and I had originally said this was going to be the canary in the coal mine for betting on Fozzy and then Fozzy went ahead and spoilered up the that whole prediction by throwing a curveball, and we'll talk about that in a couple of graphs. Isogen is staying relatively stable. It's up into the weekend, but I expect it to come back down to the 127 range, maybe stay at 130. I don't see much reason for Isogen to move either direction significantly. Noxium is trending up, and this is going to be the leader for our big talk in minerals this week. It's slightly up. I don't expect it to keep climbing. I expect it to stay steady at that 680 level for the next week or so. Now, Zydrene. Let's talk about Zydrene, because when CCP Fozzy said Zydrene, it went nuts. It was completely bought out in the market and reset to a new price. So the story behind this is that Nullsec is getting their own, or is getting a new set of ores. Traditionally, what we have seen is that the mining picture is balanced for ISK per hour. It's value balanced, as it were. So as you move down the security scale, you move up the rarity scale. So if you're mining in high sec, you're getting tons of low ends and you're getting none of the high ends. Well, before it was adjusted in Creus, you were getting all high ends in nullsec and no low ends. This was changed somewhat in Creus by adding significant tritanium yields to ABC ores, but it still meant that primarily your miners what you had to do for miners was mine the ore, ship back the high ends, sell the high ends, buy the low ends, go use the low ends. This meant that there was a gross oversupply of high-end minerals, and they don't account for the value of items nearly at all. And with Fozzy's announcement, he said that they were going to replace nullsec ores with a whole new ore bracket that better reflects the actual production needs. So instead of saying that you get all of this Zydrene and Megasite, you're instead going to get a much more even-keeled yield, like, 1 million tritanium and 700k pyrite and 100k Mexilon and 50k Noxium. We're going to go down the same use pattern. You're just going to get more of it. It's probably going to be more yield per hour or something like that. So more details will need to come, but the second he said Zydrene and the second he said nullsec ores and explained what they were, Zydrene and Megasite went through the frickin' roof. Now, Zydrene has been low, and I don't expect it to do much more action. In fact, I expect it to lose about half of that spike over the next month. Megasite, I think, is going to stay where it is, and it might climb all the way to 1,000 per unit. We saw that Megasite was particularly depressed coming into this announcement. We had actually fallen below the pre-IS Boxer level changes, which had done the last big spike. So, again, I expect this to sort of to still wean off. We have a couple of months until the release comes out. I don't expect it to fall much, and if it falls below 800, I would be shocked. Also, Morphite took a similar spike, but is coming back down. I think that there wasn't much of a picture about what Morphite's going to do, and it's still tied to Tech 2, which, if you're looking at the advanced material markets, are still pretty weak, so I don't expect Morphite to move much of anywhere over the upcoming week. Moving on to fuel. Fuel markets are staying relatively stable, except for Minmatar fuel, which took a huge nosedive over the last day or two. I expect this spike to turn around in the next few days. So if you can get it cheap, get on the market right now. Like, do not delay, do not pass go. Just get on the market and go buy up your hydrogen isotopes while you can get them cheap. I expect them to be back in line with where they were pre-crash. I'm also glad to see that Amar Fuel is starting a upward trend again. Once it hit 600, I thought that was far too low a price to sustain the activity, and I'm glad to see it back on trend for 700. It'll probably level off at 650, but we'll see what happens in the next coming weeks. Fuel blocks, nothing much to say. There was a big spike in Caldari fuel blocks, probably a weekend supplier thing. If you wanted to be a big speculator, you could say that that was because of the structures presentation, but I really wouldn't go that far. I think this was just a need and somebody bought out just a buttload of it. And another look at hydrogen isotopes, since it took such a steep dive down. I don't expect this to be real. It looks like a big sell-off, but we could be seeing this turn around in the next few days. Moving on to the outliers. We're going to start where we usually do in advanced materials. Ferrogel continues its track upwards. I don't expect it to go much higher. It's, I believe, at 2,800 at the moment. I expect it to stay there or lose its steam and go back down to 2,600. All of the advanced material markets are extremely weak. We're talking about basement prices. They don't have much room to fall. But without significant demand, there's no room for growth. So I'm hoping that the PL Brave fight brings up some more stuff. I'm hoping that NC and CFC in the South drive some content. But until we get the new Subsystem, it's hard to believe that we're going to be consuming Tech 2 in the quantities that are supplied. We're not really going to see any sort of constraint. On the other side of the coin, Fulleride took a big drop over the week, mostly in the last day, and I expect that to rebound over the weekend back to the 550 level. Again, I believe 550 to basically be the floor of this thing, and again, if you see a significant down spike, I would expect to see it reset back to this steady state we've been at for the last month or so. Nanotransistor did a spike up above 2,400. I think this is also following a spike in technetium, and this I think will probably not last the weekend. We'll be back at sub 2,300 by Monday. Tungsten carbide, which is, I hate to bring up a carbide because they're notoriously unstable. Looks like there was a big buyout for a bunch of material, and the price has been climbing. But trying to keep a carbide above a 115 price at this moment is going to be hard to do. So I expect that momentum to die off by this time next week. Again, as I said, technetium took a bit of a spike up over last week, and we're seeing that reflected in the price of nanotransistors, like I said before. Coolant was an interesting one. It took a huge nosedive, and there's not a lot of supply to point as to why. This one kind of came out of left field, and I don't know what's going on. So, if you need coolant, now's absolutely the time to buy. Again, run, don't walk. But I expect this to rubber band. I actually expected it to rubber band by now, and the fact that it hasn't has me a little bit worried. This, if you want to put on a tinfoil hat, this could be a signal that more trial accounts are using PI, and that's sort of being used as a free ISK engine. At least that's what I thought when they announced that trials could do PI, is that we'd see more of this. But I don't think the returns on PI are enough to really justify that level of churning complexity. So Another interesting material in the production markets is burned logic circuits have been on a rally. And we should see this start to work its way through the rig markets. At the moment, I keep seeing spikes and falls through the rig markets, but nothing really worth sharing on the show. But as this price goes up, I expect it to drag rigs along with it. So keep an eye out. If you are a salvager, now might be a time to go sell off a bunch. It looks like it's a strong buying curve at the moment. Moving on to the Ishtar, we got the release on Tuesday, and this snapshot shows you this huge fall off. I think the volume chart is more telling than the price one at the moment. We were seeing 250 sold daily, and we're seeing now like 150 or about 150 sold daily instead. That's a huge drop, and that's a lot of wind to take out of the Tech 2 production sales. Like, Ishtars were really a driver for Moongoo consumption, and without a hack in a major fleet role, without a heavy assault cruiser or a battleship or a command ship, one of those bigger ships in heavy fleet rotation, this is a bad sign for the moon markets. This is really, really bad for moon markets. If this keeps up, if we don't see something else come in to hold up the demand, if we don't see interceptors and bombers take up some of the weight, if we don't see a new hack meta, if we don't see Ishtars being used in spite of the nerf, the entire moon market is going to go into a frickin' tailspin. So, I'd prefer not to do that, because then that will further constrict the wheels of destruction, because SRPs won't get filled. There'll be less PvP. Less PvP means less demand. You kind of end up in this deflationary spiral. I hope there's something in the wings to help take care of this, because I hate seeing so little demand for such an integral part of the map. Moving on to Tengus, they also took it pretty hard on the chin during the rebalance pass. I had said 2 weeks ago that I thought they were in the basement, and I was frickin' wrong. They fell down to 140 million over the last week or so. I don't expect them to fall much further, but seeing as I have been wrong so far, we're in extremely weak territory. It's hard to believe it could fall much further, but we'll see where things go. There's going to be a big shuffle. I still think that T3s are going to end up in the fleet meta. It's just going to be a matter of figuring out exactly where and how. So I expect a few months of this to be quiet and low. So if you wanted a Tengu, if you needed something to go run missions with, Tengus are cheap. Go buy them on fire sale. Another interesting ship that flagged this week was the Stabber. We saw a couple of spikes in volume over the last week. And I think what we're seeing right now is an overcorrection, especially given the spikes in high-end minerals and the continued strength of the middle-tier minerals. I think that Stabbers are a pretty decent buy. Now, keep in mind that only about 50 sell a day, so don't go completely bonkers. But this one's probably a decent place to do a little bit of speculating in. I think they're underpriced at the moment. Moving on to still talking about ships. If you followed the keynote, they talked about the ship skins changing from this next store paint job kind of thing to a account tied system that'll let you change on the fly, and you buy it once, you never have to deal with it again. And a bunch of these ships spiked in our analysis, and I just thought I'd go through the view we used on the shows over the last weekend during Fanfest. These are the buy and sell prices in JITA taken every other hour with our Eve Central cron script. And you can see that when the announcements were made, we saw enormous spikes, but then people kind of got their heads back on straight. The supplies for these ships are weird. They're spawned using necks, or they might be spawned from some special drops. So it's hard to keep a speculative bubble in these because the supply chain isn't as linear, isn't as direct. It has other substitutions that are quick ways to make a buck. I'm gonna go see if I can publish all of the different ships by size in this view. I just didn't get a chance to write up the new plots for it. So that's my 2 cents on the new ship skins. And again, if you missed the keynote, if you have one of these ships in your hangar when the change goes live, you will have that skin in the interface. Now, the gotcha is that there are something like 22, I believe, special ship skins, and they're adding 208. So even though you may have these, I, one, expect them to remain at a cheap price point, and two, I expect that they're just going to act as a primer for you to want to buy more skins. I think it's going to be, they're going for the same sort of niche that MOBAs go for, where you can spend your points on these items, but with the RM market as an arbiter for that, it's going to be interesting to see the actual logistics of it. Moving on, we're going to talk about a couple of subsystems, some surprising ones. Tengu propulsion interlaced nanofibers have been on a tear downwards. This looks like it might have been a production oversupply kind of problem. The prices are extremely low. I would have expected them to rebound last week, and it looks like they tried, but 3.5 million might be where they just live now. It's interesting to see when I looked at the defensive modules that actually did get changed, there wasn't much to talk about. They've been on sort of a linear drive down as tech to basically follow the Tech 3 prices falling down. Like, they weren't falling faster than the hulls. And then Skyla hits, and we see Tengu propulsion, and I guess only Tengu propulsion. We see Tengu propulsion take a huge dive instead of the much more popular active shielding module. Moving on to the Survey Scanner 2, this one was a huge spike a few weeks ago, but had since cooled off, and we'd seen it back on a mostly stable state. And then it looks like somebody went and sold off a bunch of stocks, so I believe they're underpriced at the moment. And if you need survey scanners, you might want to go get them. I expect mining to increase in the new Fozisov picture, but we'll see where that goes. Another interesting one, we missed this the last show because it only spiked like right when I broadcasted. Heavy Pulse Laser 2s took a huge run up through Fanfest, and then that bubble just popped. There were a couple other items who did this. Heavy Pulse Lasers were the only one that actually had significant volume attached to them. I just thought it was interesting that they spiked up. They're not quite back down to the steady state level, so they could go either way at the moment. Moving on, medium hull repper 2s have been on a bit of a roller coaster. I only bring this one up because the new Galente Tech 3 Destroyer was teased, and the Hecate, I believe, is what it was called. I suck. The new Galente Tech 3 has a hull tanking bonus, and I was sort of thinking that maybe this is some sort of speculation around that. Unfortunately, the spike doesn't line up with Fanfest, so this may have just been speculators speculating. That one's that one's quite a mess. And I'm being told by the chat room, Hecate is the name of the Tech 3 Galente destroyer. So, moving on, 250mm railgun ones also took a pretty sharp turn up along with the Fanfest announcement. I think this is largely due as a reaction to the mineral changes announced, and we may see it do another loop back up. If you're a betting man, I think this one's a decent one to. If you're the betting type, I believe 250mm railgun ones are worth betting on, and if you continue to be a betting man, I expect the waves to ripple back up to the Tech 2 version as well. If you are not a betting man and you want to get a chance to say, haha, I told you so, this is probably a bad bet because medium railguns got nerfed in Skyla, but nerfed being adjusted back into line, I think is nerf might be too strong a word. Also, 280mm howitzer artilleries have been creeping up in volume and creeping up in price. Again, I think this has to do with the raise in high-end minerals. It might be precursors to a meta change. It's not a lot to go off of at the moment, so I'm kind of just grasping. Another interesting one that has been popular for the last 2 weeks has been large micro jump drives. I'm wondering if perhaps there is a new meta going around, something like a I'm not exactly sure what the meta would be, but a micro jump driving meta. Volumes are high, prices are high. If you have a bunch of these blueprints just sitting around because exploration gives them out like candy, this would be a great opportunity to go liquidate them. I've also been watching drones, especially since the Skynet nerf. We had expected to see some activity in geckos and some downward activity in fighters and maybe some high up activity in heavy drones, but we really didn't see that happen in fighters. I haven't shared them for the last few weeks because there's nothing really to share. They don't get consumed in high volumes. But integrated ogres took a huge turn up. Right now, it's not a great time to buy in, but if you have some to sell, now would be a great chance to sell. Moving on to some implants that were interesting this last week. Genelution Core Augmentation CA2s, the newbie implants. They had been on an upward tick, and then a few weeks back, there was the Green Man Gaming did a promotion. I know Humble Bundle did a promotion. So we should be seeing some supply coming back in thanks to the pilot starter packs. I can't remember what they're called. Also, even though I can't track it through Crest, I would believe that the prices for the training boosters, the slot 4 boosters that are like a special implant, I expect those to be falling just as badly. So if you're in a very long-term speculation route, it might be a good chance to keep an eye on these prices for a chance to buy in. But I expect the prices to remain... I don't expect the prices to go turning back up again until 6 months from now. So it's a very long bet. Moving on to predictions. We're going to do this a little bit differently. First, I wanted to start with, I published a few weeks ago on the blog my guess at the CSM, and it looks like I was mostly right. I'm actually pretty happy about this because it kind of felt like a coin toss for the last 4 seats. The misses were, I had Bam Stroker over Chance Ravine. I still wish Bam did better, but that's just the way the cookie crumbles. I did not have Sort Dragon on my list. I had UAX Death, whatever his name is. And I also didn't have Mike Azariah because I didn't think he'd be able to swing enough to get a 3rd term, but he proved me wrong, so I'm sure he'll do a great job. Also, I'm pretty happy about hitting the nail on the head. Pardon me. I'm pretty happy about hitting the nail on the head, picking Sugar Kyle as the permanent seat, but I had Sion Kumitomo over Manfred Sidious for the 2nd seat, so it looks like Goons may have split their vote a little bit more to get 3 seats instead of a guaranteed 2. I'm also a little disappointed that it took so many eliminations to get Steve Rnukin in. And again, I'll be publishing that information as I get a chance to actually look at it. This week is hectic. Also, another one I've been watching, and my predictions are not coming true, so I need to stop making them. With all of the talk about structures and Fozzie's talk about bringing SOV upgrades to players as a way to give back the demand that SBUs are taking away. And Zerali, sorry, let me go back and do this. And as Zerali is pointing out in the chat, I need to change the ticker on Corbex because during the Alliance panel at FanFest, he changed his allegiances and joined the CFC. So the CFC has 4 seats. So sneaky. Anyway, so as I was about to say, these are one place I've been putting predictions, and they have not been coming true, so I need to stop making them. With Fozzie's discussion of putting SOV upgrades in the hands of players as a way to offset the lack of demand thanks to SBUs being removed, on top of all of the structure hype, I expected high-end PI to actually take some drive up. Like, if you want to make that long bet, if you really want to do the Hail Mary pass and look like a genius or an idiot, it's a wide berth here. If you want to look like a genius and strike it rich on a big gamble, I think P4s from PI are worth your time. But as you can see, I'm the only one who thinks that, according to the market. So take this with as big a grain of salt that you can manage, because this is going to turn out to either be brilliant or retarded, and there's not a whole lot of middle space. Another one I've been keeping a very close eye on has been advanced materials. As you can see, when I put it in this view, everything is enormously flat. We are so very flat, like Nebraska flat. And this has me worried in a bigger sense because I'm worried about material. So it's not an ISK deflation thing. It's a material deflation thing. And I'm hoping there's something in the winds. I'm hoping that CCP is keeping an eye on this. Maybe I'm the only one who cares. We'll end up seeing. So this one has me actually actively worried. And I'm hoping that something changes the atmosphere here, because don't like the way the winds are blowing. And with that, that's pretty much the end of the show. Thanks again for tuning in to the Eve Prosper Market Show. I've been your host, Lockefox. If you want to follow the show, You can talk to us at the Tweetfleet Slack server in the Prosper channel. That is the best and fastest way to get in touch with me. If you want to follow the show, you can do so. All you have to remember is Eve Prosper. That'll get you to our Twitch channel, our Twitter channel. EveProsper.com gets you to the blog. There'll be the podcast on the blog, and we just launched a Patreon. So if you want to support the show, if you want to send me and ATN a beer, more than happy to go sign up there. It would mean a lot to me and the rest of the team. The shows are up on YouTube. Don't forget to tune in there. Don't forget to follow the new Twitter. If you want to tune in live, you can do so at twitch.tv/EveProsper on Friday nights at 0200. That's Thursday night U.S. time. Again, I've been Lockefox. This has been the Eve Prosper Show. Thank you so much for tuning in.